Hello, everyone. Trollin here. I wanted to take a minute and talk about something that I think is really difficult for so many of us, and that's the subjectivity of our experience in the world. We see this a lot in the neurodivergent communities where we feel like our perspective of things is misaligning with the neurotypical perspective of things. But this is really a mutual struggle back and forth. It kind of seems like everybody has this struggle. But before we get into it particularly deeply, I want to just make sure that everyone remembers I'm not a professional. I'm not a mental health provider, a neurologist. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. Nothing that I say should be taken as professional or medical advice. It's purely out of interest and hopefully to spark some thoughts in your minds. So, to start off, let's talk about the McCullough effect. Probably some of you have encountered this. The McCullough effect is, you might think of it as an optical illusion, where you have a grid of horizontal black and green lines, we'll say, and then another grid of vertical black and magenta lines. First, you or whoever else looks at these lines and they kind of focus on them and they look back and forth between the two sets of lines. You don't have to stare at it, you don't have to keep your eyes open. But typically, when going through this experiment, you would just move your eyes kind of generally back and forth between these two grids. And this process takes 3 to 4 minutes. And after this process, the person who's gone through this experience looks at a plain white and black grid. And these grids, just like the other two, will either be lines that are running horizontal or they'll be lines that are running vertically. Now, the interesting thing is that this plain white and black set of lines, when you look at it before, you just see white and black lines. But often after the experience, the person will see some various intensity of color laid over top. And so it's sort of like an after image. If you think about when you see something bright and you close your eyes and you can still see that after image, it's sort of like that. But the interesting thing is that it's occurring while your eyes are open. And more so than that, it's a long term effect that stays with you. And I don't mean long term just as in like a minute or two. Many people will experience the McCullough effect all the way through the current day. They might experience it the next morning. They may experience it for a week or a month or 3 months or even more. So, after being inducted by this color grid, you experience an ongoing effect that can last a long time. Now, what I think is particularly interesting about this is that this demonstrates that the way that your neurons in your brain are actually working, the way that they are programmed to perceive the world, has been changed. Prior to the experience, you see things one way, and after that experience, you see things another way. And this isn't like an ideal, this isn't a thought process. This is actually your senses interpreting reality in a new way because of an experience that you've had. What I think is fascinating is when we don't think about the McCullough effect as just this one off neat trick, but we realize that everything that we go through every day has the potential to change how our neurons are working. When I go through maybe a big event, maybe it's an exciting positive event, or maybe it's a traumatizing negative event, this actually changes how I perceive the world in the future. And so when I'm standing there looking at a situation and a friend of mine is standing next to me looking at the same situation, we're not perceiving reality in its literal sense. Our neurons are firing individually in their own ways to give us an interpretation of reality. It's a good reminder that each of us are seeing not the literal truth, we're seeing an experience of the truth. Now, coming back to the McCullough effect for a moment, some people will spend 3 to 5 minutes looking at the two sets of colored lines, and they, the next day, will no longer see that color laid over top of the black and white lines. Other people will spend 3 to 5 minutes, and 3 months later, they will still very intensely see those colored effects laying on top of the black and white lines. Some people will receive this effect with great intensity for a great period of time. Some people will receive it with a great intensity for a short period of time. Some people low intensity, long time. Some people low intensity, low time. And it's even possible that others don't experience this effect at all. This is debated what the cause is, why some people experience this for a long time, why some people don't, why there's different intensities. But one possibility could be your genes. So when we look at genetics, we say that that's your genotype, the things that make you who you are, that are programmed into you biologically, just molecule to molecule. This is what you're made of. And your genotype could say that you are less susceptible or more susceptible to a lower intensity or a greater intensity, or a lower duration or a higher duration, or not at all. However, having the susceptibility or the lack of susceptibility doesn't automatically make you experience the color overlay. Instead, what makes you experience that is going through the induction process. This is called your phenotype. So when you go out into the world and you experience all of these things, and it changes how your neurons are actually firing in your brain, and it changes the condition that you are in. This is called your phenotype. It's a combination of your genes and of your real world experiences. So when we step back and we look at these miscommunications that we have, we look at our experiences out in the world, we already know now that our experiences will change how we interpret the world. But not only that, when we try and share in an experience with someone, when we say, well, let me show you what I'm talking about, and we expose them to this experience that changed us and how our neurons fire, they may not be changed in the same way. Their genes and their existing phenotype may direct them to change in a different way, or it may direct them to not change at all. It's really important to remember that we are all unique, but just because we try and share in an experience or we try and share in knowledge and understanding that doesn't mean that we're automatically going to see eye to eye. We are experiencing the world in different ways, and that's okay. And as long as we remember that, as long as we remember that the person that we're talking to is not going to be interpreting us literally, or the person who's seeing us behave in a certain way is not going to be experiencing our version of reality, it's a little easier to step back and away from absolutes. And by absolutes, I mean the words that I use do not convey an absolute meaning. We like to think so much of the time that, well, if we all just use the same set of rules, if we all just go by the dictionary definitions, well, communication should be easy. But the dictionary and the literal definition of a word doesn't take into account our human experience. It doesn't take into account that phenotype. It doesn't take into account that when I hear a particular word, it may trigger a series of neurons firing in my head that bring about certain feelings. Using myself as an example, when I hear the word friend, I tend to move towards upset because of previous experiences that I've had. Whereas someone who hasn't had those experiences or isn't as susceptible to those experiences as I am, they may hear the word friend and get excited about seeing someone. So it doesn't matter that the literal definition exists. My understanding and interpretation and perception of that experience means something different.